I'm not really one for introductions. I'm just gonna start talking about something that really interests me, and that is Area 51. There's a lot that I don't know about the base, which is what I want to get into. We're gonna cover stuff like the geography and the security of the base, the history of the base, all about UFOs and what they did regarding UFOs at the base. There was a lawsuit that was filed against Area 51 that I'll get into, and the conspiracies that surround the base is also something I'm going to be talking about. Now, let's get into the introduction. Area 51 is a United States Air Force facility that is highly classified. It is located inside the Nevada Test and Training Range, a southern part of Nevada. It is 83 miles north-northwest of Las Vegas. There is little known about this facility as its operations are not made known to the public. The Air Force is very secretive about it too, only stating that it is an open testing training range. It is owned by the Department of Defense and operated through the U.S. Air Force. People generally think the facility is used to support the development and testing of experimental aircraft and weapon systems. And while the facility has never officially been declared as a secret base, all research and occurrences that happen in Area 51 are top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. While the base was acquired in 1955, the CIA publicly confirmed its existence for the first time on June 25, 2013. This was due to a Freedom of Information Act request that was filed in 2005. Now, let's get into the geography and security of the base. The actual base was originally located on a rectangular plot of land that was about 6 by 10 miles. It is now called the Groom Box, which I personally think is a very interesting thing to call a plot of land. It currently is still a rectangular area, but the dimensions are 23 by 25, and that could be wrong because, like I've been saying, we don't know a lot about the base. But it's a good amount of land. That's all you pretty much need to know. Area 51 also shares a border with the Yucca Flat region of the Nevada test site, which is a nuclear testing site. The base is located off of Groom Lake, which is a salt flat. This salt flat is also fairly massive. It's not as big as any of the Great Lakes, but it's still a considerable size. It is 3.7 miles from north to south and 3 miles from east to west at its widest point. The American government I am already very untrustworthy of, not only because of the minimal information regarding Area 51, but a plethora of other things. The area that surrounds Groom Lake is permanently off limits to both civilian and even normal military air traffic. Security clearances are checked regularly, and cameras and weaponry are not allowed. Military pilots training in the NAFR can even risk disciplinary action if they stray into the exclusionary box surrounding Groom's airspace. There are also buried motion sensors that act as surveillance around the facility and surrounding land area. The perimeter of the base is marked out by orange posts and is controlled by guards that are in white pickup trucks and camouflage fatigues. Signage around the base perimeter advises that deadly force is authorized against trespassers. Technology is also heavily used to maintain the border of the base. Surveillance cameras and motion detectors, like I said, are placed a good distance away from the base on public land to notify guards of people approaching. Now that the basic geography of the base is established, let's get into the history of Area 51. I compiled a lot of information about the specific aircraft that was tested, but if I included everything, I'd probably spend at least an hour talking about these planes. I'll sum it up the best I can. The Lockheed U-2 aircraft, the entire reason the facility was founded, was basically a spy plane. The aircraft accounted for many of the UFO sightings in the area at the time, since it was new technology and looked significantly different than any other aircraft the military used. The U-2 could reach altitudes that were a lot higher than any other aircraft could at the time. They tested it for about a year before they put it into service in 1956. After that, Area 51 began testing and developing other aircraft. The A-12, also known as Oxcart, was a reconnaissance plane. The project was established in August of 1959 for, quote, anti-radar studies, aerodynamic structural tests, and engineering designs. That's basically all of the information I got on the A-12, so do with that what you will. Another aircraft that was developed was the F-117, also called the Nighthawk, and this was a sexy beast of a plane. It was a single-seat, twin-engine fighter bomber that was built by the Lockheed Corporation for the U.S. Air Force. This was the first stealth aircraft developed solely around the idea of evading detection by radar and other sensors. She had a triangular outline, her wings swept back sharply from the nose at an exact 67-degree angle. Her surface was composed of flat planes that were oriented in a way to reflect radar waves away from the transmitter. Her weaponry consisted of laser-guided bombs or radar-seeking or infrared-seeking missiles that were carried internally. It took them a while to build one that was actually functional, but when they did develop one that was fully operational, they secretively delivered it to the Air Force in 1982. There were only 59 of these planes produced. They used these planes a lot in combat, from the incursion into Panama in 1989 to the Persian Gulf War of 1990 to 1991 to the Iraq War of 2003 to 2011. There was a lot of information surrounding this aircraft, but I feel like I've talked about it enough for you to get the general idea of what the Air Force was developing in Area 51, new weaponry and machinery to use in combat against other countries. Our next topic is UFOs. UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. If you didn't already know that by now, UFOs became a huge subject of interest following the rocketry that was developed after World War II. To some, they were thought to be intelligent extraterrestrial life that was visiting Earth. The first well-known UFO sighting happened in 1947. A businessman by the name of Kenneth Arnold claimed to have seen a group of 9 high-speed objects near Mount Rainier in Washington while he was flying his small plane. He estimated that they moved at several thousand miles per hour, and he stated that it looked like they moved, quote, like saucers skipping on water. Sightings of these aircrafts increased, and in 1948, the Air Force began an investigation of these reports that was called Project Sign. People in this project thought the UFOs were most likely sophisticated Soviet aircraft, but others thought it might be spacecraft from other worlds. Because of this, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, or ETH, was established. In a year, this project was succeeded by Project Grudge, which was also later replaced by the longest-lived of the inquiries into UFOs, Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. From 1952 to 1969, the project compiled reports of more than 12,000 sightings, or random events. Each of these was eventually classified as either identified with a known astronomical, atmospheric, or artificial human-caused phenomenon, or unidentified. This category, unidentified, only accounted for approximately 6% of the total 12,000 plus reports. It included cases that lacked sufficient information to make an identification with something that's known. In the summer of 1952, UFO reports were at an all-time high. The CIA was prompted from this to get the U.S. government to establish an expert panel of scientists to investigate what was going on. This panel was led by H.P. Robertson, who was a physicist at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, California. This panel included other physicists, an astronomer, and a rocket engineer. This panel was dubbed the Robertson Panel. They met for 3 days in 1953 and interviewed various military officers and the person at the head of Project Blue Book. They reviewed films and photographs of UFOs, which probably weren't very good quality. They concluded that about 90% of the sightings could easily be attributed to astronomical and meteorologic phenomena, like bright planets and stars, meteors, auroras, or ion clouds, or to earthly objects like aircrafts, balloons, birds, and searchlights. These sightings also posed no security threat and had no evidence to support the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Many parts of this panel's findings were kept classified until 1979, and the period of secrecy only further fueled the suspicions of a government conspiracy. I wonder why. After this, another panel was set up in 1966 at the request of the Air Force to review some of the more interesting material that was gathered from Project Blue Book. After 2 years, the committee made a detailed study of 59 UFO sightings and released its results as Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects. This was also known as the Condon Report, named after Edward U. Condon, the physicist who led the investigation. In this report, a total of 37 scientists had written chapters or parts of chapters that covered the investigations of the 59 UFO sightings in detail. The committee concluded that there was no evidence of anything other than commonplace phenomena in the reports and that there was no need for further investigations into UFOs, which I think is a little weird. Project Blue Book was thereafter dismantled in 1969 due to a decline in sightings. These weren't the only investigations into UFOs, however. Despite the failure of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, a few scientists and engineers, most notably J. Allen Hynek, concluded that a small fraction of the most reliable UFO reports gave definite indications for the presence of extraterrestrial visitors. Hynek founded the Center for UFO Studies, or CUFOS, which continues to investigate the phenomenon today. Another major study on UFO sightings was the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. It was a secret project that ran from 2007 to 2012, when the existence of this program was made public in December of 2017. The most newsworthy aspect of it was a report that the government possessed alloys and compounds purportedly obtained from UFOs that were of unidentifiable nature. An alloy is a mixture of chemical elements where the primary component is a metal, and compounds are mixes of two or more elements that are chemically bonded in a fixed ratio, like H2O, water, CO2, carbon dioxide. Many scientists still remain skeptical about this claim, however, because, they don't think it's possible to just have a new element that they don't know of. And UFO sightings don't only exist in America, obviously. The only other official and fairly complete records of UFO sightings are from Canada. The records comprise about 750 sightings. There are many less complete records that have come from the United Kingdom, Sweden, Denmark, Australia, and Greece. In the Soviet Union, sightings of UFOs were usually only prompted by the testing of secret military rockets. And fun fact about that, the Soviet Union actually encouraged the public's belief that these rockets were of extraterrestrial origin because they didn't want to reveal the true nature of the tests. Eventually, they decided that the descriptions of the UFOs might give away too much information, and they stopped encouraging the public's opinions. UFO sightings in China have similarly been provoked by military activity that the public just doesn't know about. UFO reports have always varied widely in not only reliability, but also the number of witnesses, if the witnesses were independent of each other, the observing conditions, like if the weather was clear and there were no clouds in the sky, and the direction of the sighting. Typically, though, witnesses who actually take the time to report a sighting consider the object to be extraterrestrial in origin, or possibly a military craft under intelligent control. This assumption is usually based on what the public perceives as formation flying by sets of objects, unnatural, often sudden motions, the lack of sound, changes in brightness or color, and strange shapes. There was actually a lawsuit filed against the Air Force and United States Environmental Protection Agency in 1994. 5 unnamed civilian contractors and the widows of contractors Walter Kaza and Robert Frost alleged that they had been present when large quantities of unknown chemicals were burned in open pits and trenches at Groom. Rutgers University biochemists analyzed the biopsies from the complainants and found high levels of dioxin, dibenzofuran, and trichloroethylene in their body fat. Their body fat. They also alleged that they had sustained skin, liver, and respiratory injuries due to the work they did at Groom, and that this had also contributed to the deaths of Frost and Kaza. The plaintiffs sought compensation for their injuries, claiming that the Air Force had illegally handled the toxic materials, and that the EPA had failed in its duty to enforce the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. This governs the handling of dangerous materials, but, it doesn't actually apply to the government. They also sought information about the chemicals, hoping they could find some sort of medical treatment for the survivors. The response from the government was frustrating, to say the least. They invoked the state secrets privilege and petitioned U.S. District Judge Philip Pro to not allow the disclosure of classified documents or examination of secret witnesses, claiming that it could expose classified information and threaten national security. Judge Pro actually rejected the government's argument, which prompted President Bill Clinton to get involved. He issued a presidential determination that exempted what it called, quote, the Air Force's operating location near Groom Lake, Nevada, from environmental disclosure laws. Judge Pro ended up having to dismiss the suit due to lack of evidence. Lastly, the conspiracies. When I was researching this, I found a lot more than I thought existed. I'll go through some of the main ones and discuss first-person accounts of working at the facility. The first conspiracy involves the storage, examination, and reverse engineering of crashed alien spacecraft, including materials supposedly recovered at Roswell, the study of their occupants, and the manufacture of aircraft based on alien technology. The second is just meetings or joint undertakings with extraterrestrials. The third is the development of exotic energy weapons for the Strategic Defense Initiative or other weapons programs. The fourth is simply the development of weather control. The fifth is the development of time travel and transportation technology. The sixth is the development of exotic propulsion systems related to the Aurora program. And the seventh is activities related to a shadowy one-world government or the Majestic 12 organization. For first-hand accounts, I'm going to include one of my own experiences, which I will say, obviously not me, but I have an acquaintance who was on base outside of Area 51 who saw some things, and Bob Lazar. In 1989, Bob Lazar claimed that he worked at Area 51's Sector 4, said to have been located underground inside the Papoose Range near Papoose Lake. He claimed that he had been contacted to work with alien spacecraft that the government had in its possession. If you want to learn more, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to link the podcast he did with Joe Rogan in the description, because it actually has a lot of good information about it. My own experience, I will say, is all hearsay, but it comes from someone who was in the Air Force for, I think, 22 years. I'm going to make the identity and pronouns very vague because I don't want to get this person in trouble or threaten their safety. They were stationed in Nevada from 2018 to 2020, which is, fairly recent, obviously. While they were there, a fellow, Army officer recounted that every Wednesday they would test, a flying object at night. Sure enough, next Wednesday rolls around, a bright blue light appeared in the sky. They recounted how it moved strangely, unlike any aircraft they'd ever seen before, which is a lot because that was their main role in the Air Force, to operate and pilot aircrafts. It moved up and down in a single line, side to side in a single line. Normal Air Force or aircraft can't do this, and I might be bad at explaining, but just know that it moved unnaturally. This continued every Wednesday that they were stationed there, but they weren't allowed to actually ask any questions on what it was. And, obviously when they asked the person who told them about the testing every Wednesday, they were like, oh yeah, it's a UFO. So, yeah. This was just an interesting experience that I wanted to share. You don't have to believe it, but with how the CIA confirmed the existence of UFOs a couple years ago, I think it isn't really that far-fetched to believe it. Anyways, that'll do it for this first ever video I'm uploading. I think Area 51 is a very interesting place, and after learning the history behind it and everything that took place there, it still just makes it all the more interesting and suspicious that we still don't know anything about this place. And I hope that one day the government will actually, maybe tell us some things, but it's the government. They're not going to do anything for us because they don't care enough. I want to talk a lot about various government conspiracies, but honestly, man, some of it, just know it's a lot. I'll probably eventually expose a good amount of this stuff, so just keep up with me, I guess. I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe learn something new today. I don't care if you like, subscribe, who cares? Title. Yeah, whatever. Okay, bye, I guess.